Today we start a new series, and on your notes there, the first, so you have 3 pages. One will be our passage that we're going to focus on today. The flip side of that should be your sermon notes, and then the third page will be the discussion questions. And so I guess technically you got 4 pages because we have the bigger sheets. So, but when you find the Bible passage, the flip side of that, we'll have your sermon notes for this week. And this week we are starting a new series called Escape. And over the next few weeks, we're going to explore this idea of escaping things. Some things that, we are going to escape, as we will see. Some things that we want to escape are bad, right? They're bad. We know that we need to get away from these bad things in life. But there are also good things that we can have a desire to escape as well, right? There are good things that we may just not enjoy anymore. There are good things that are good for us, that because of our sin nature, because of our rebellion, we want to escape from those things. And so over the course of the next few weeks, we're going to identify those things, but not only are we going to identify and discuss things that we're escaping from, we're also going to look at things that we're escaping to. Sometimes as we're looking at these things that are bad for us, the things that we know are bad, that we want to escape, it makes sense. We understand that what we're escaping to is likely really good. Obviously, if we're in an abusive relationship, or if we're in an addiction situation, or if there's something that is threatening our lives, and we want to escape those things, then we know that what we're running to is likely better. It is good in comparison to where we are, right? But sometimes, when we're escaping the things that we may perceive as bad, or as not fun, or not something that we're really interested in right now, it can be a good thing, and as we escape, we're escaping to something that is much worse. And sometimes, it's not necessarily the thing that we're escaping is inherently bad or good, but when we walk away from it, we stumble, we escape into something that is worse. And so, over the next few weeks, we're going to kind of dig into these different things, and hopefully as we kind of roll into this stuff, we're going to see some fresh and new things, and recognizing that no matter what we're wanting to escape, no matter how we are escaping, that we actually understand that we can find guidance in the Bible and through prayer and through our Christian relationships. And before we start today, I have a question for you guys, and you don't have to speak because I don't trust some of you as what your response might be, but as you elaborate on this, but who here's ever been bored? Who's ever been bored? Raise your hand. So, I know some of you guys are thinking, well, it depends on how long you talk. I might just get bored in this room. And we have comfy seats, except for the one that Cam is in, because I put a tack in his chair so to keep him awake. Hopefully we won't run into any boredom issues in here today, but everybody experiences boredom, right? It is something that seems to kind of come on real strong, right? You can be sitting somewhere and you're fine, you're engaged, and all of a sudden it's just like, all of a sudden your mind just starts drifting and you're bored. And so, first thing we need to recognize today as we kind of dig into this is that boredom is one thing that we try to escape. It's one thing that we try to escape, is boredom. Now, I've been sitting in meetings, I don't know about you guys, but I've been sitting in meetings, and again, it starts out, and I'm like, yes, we're talking about whatever. Prime example, we were having a church planting meeting, and I was sitting there and I was just like, yes, this is awesome, and then they got into some mind-numbing data processing thing, and I just kind of blanked, and I just was kind of staring off into space for a minute, and then I had my phone kind of on the table, and it buzzed, and I try not to, but I look at it to see kind of what's happening. I was just kind of bored, and so I'm checking out, and so I've got, it's one thing when I'm checking emails, but it's another thing when I'm sitting there playing solitaire. It's those moments where I'm trying to escape my boredom. I'm trying to engage my mind in something that's going to entertain me, something that's going to maybe fulfill me a little bit, something that's going to just take me away from that situation that I'm in. And of course, in this particular case, true story, I was sitting there and wasn't really paying attention to what was going on, and they asked me a question. And so not only was I trying to escape my boredom, but in that moment I was trying to escape embarrassment, right? Because my mind had drifted off and wasn't paying attention to what was going on. And my escape into something different led me into a situation where I was facing embarrassment. I lost my dignity in that moment, right? I lost my pride. I was embarrassed to say, hey, could you ask me that question again? Because I don't really know what you just said because you were boring for the last 5 minutes. I didn't say that. But so I kind of thought it.
You can think it.
You can think it.
But
But honestly, like if we think about this, boredom is a common disease. It's something that we all suffer from time to time, right? Be sitting in class and your mind just starts wandering. Economics, some of the business stuff that I took in school, man, I remember. It's like, oh my gosh, Bueller. Like really? Can I not just have somebody who has a little more charisma in the classroom? Anyway, I'll tell you a funny story with Clara, our oldest. She used to kill us with this. Whenever we were doing something that wasn't exactly what she wanted to do, or maybe it was something that wasn't entertaining her at the moment, she would just all of a sudden come up and she would just blurt out, "This is so boring! This is so boring!" And yes, she said bowing. And it was really cute. Like, we would just kind of have to laugh because it's like, here she is. It's like, we're in the grocery store, honey. I'm sorry. If you want to eat, we have to be here. You're too small to stay by yourself, so we're all at the boring grocery store. I'm sorry. While that statement was cute, generally what followed in the next couple of minutes was not very cute. Her trying to escape the bowing moment led into behavior that ultimately led her down a path of self-destruction, into corrective behavior. Wasn't all the time. She's a fairly good kid, but the point is, we get into this trap of being bored when we are idle, when we're not engaged in something. Sometimes we can escape our boredom by stepping into something that's not good for us. And many of you guys know that I worked in the entertainment business for a long time. I was working in the Christian artist industry, and we had tours that we put together. And a lot of times what we would do is we would have 3 or 4 bands on tour together. They'd be on the road for a couple of months at a time, and we would usually try to book a comedian, stand-up comedian who would go out and be the MC for the show. Like, he would come out and do, kind of warm the crowd up, and then as we were changing out drum sets and fixing the stage up for the next artist, they would come up and they would kill 10-15 minutes with some jokes and whatever else. Well, we had this one comedian on the road, and I was kind of hanging out talking with him one day, and we got to just kind of talking about different comedians that we enjoyed and all this other stuff, and we kind of landed on some folks like Robin Williams and some other guys who kind of fell into a lifestyle of drug abuse and different things. And as we got to talking, he was like, comedians really, like, they have a hard time when they're on the road. It's easy for them to step into destructive behavior because there's so much free time. There's so much free time. And of course, we were on the road, and the bands have to be there. They have to kind of help the stage guys get their sound set up, get their things in place. All a comedian has to do is get a microphone and tap on it. Is this thing on? And they're good. Like, that's it. But yet they have to be there. They have to be part of the crew. They have to be there for catering. They have to be there for the different things that that they are responsible for. And it's not very much, but they have to be there. And this guy was telling me, he's like, there are a lot of comedians who show up at clubs. They have to be there for a certain time, by a certain time, to just get checked in and get food and whatever else. And then they're just there. And of course, in the club scene, it's very different than in XYZ church who's bringing a Christian tour. But they have all this free time, and there's drugs and alcohol readily available for them. And so they're sitting there, they're bored, and here's a presentation of, hey man, you bored? You want to have a little fun? Here, try this. And anything that you can imagine, they pretty much have access to. And so in those moments when these guys are sitting around with nothing really to do, their escape from boredom is to indulge in substance abuse. Studies show that a lot of substance abuse actually stems from these types of moments of boredom. There's a lot of illicit behavior. There's a lot of negative things that happen because they're just bored. A lot of kids, a lot of juveniles turn into delinquents because they're bored. They don't have something engaging them. They're not tapped into an activity that kind of keeps their mind occupied. And even as adults, it's easy for us to fall into this trap, right? We can be sitting around. I know my wife travels, and there's a lot of times when I'm sitting here just flipping through Netflix, looking for something to watch while I'm waiting for her to get finished with whatever she's doing and be able to call me so I can go to bed. And then, of course, I have my window of time that I can go to sleep, and then once that passes, then I'm up for the next 4 hours, but that's beside the point. But we have all these opportunities for us to fall into this cycle of boredom. And it's very easy for us to want to escape this. There's a plethora of activities that we can engage in that are not exactly productive. They're not exactly good for us. The Living Bible, Proverbs 16:27, is translated as, "Idle hands are the devil's workshop, and idle lips are his mouthpiece." You see, when our minds are idle, when our bodies are idle, we just kind of start churning on things that maybe we shouldn't be churning on. When we're idle, that's when the devil can kind of start sneaking in. As I'm scrolling through Netflix, it's amazing the number of things that come up that probably shouldn't be watched by somebody who wants to maintain a moral life. Right? Scrolling through the internet, the number of ads that seem innocent enough, the clickbait that seems innocent enough, and man, I tell you what, I watch YouTube sometimes at night when I can't sleep, and I will start out with like an Andy Stanley sermon. And when I wake up 3 hours later to turn my phone off, I have no idea what the heck is on my screen or how I got there. But there's craziness that just kind of comes up. When we get into this idle, sort of sedentary state of being, it opens us up. It opens us up for attack. And it's not just when we're sitting idle. We can get into a routine. We can have our daily activity. We go through the same steps every single day. And after a couple of months of that, it may become boring to us, right? Just going through the same thing, having the same piece of toast with jelly every morning for breakfast. At some point, you will become bored with that breakfast, and you will want something different, right? We can have our routine, and it can put us into this rut. And in that rut, we start experiencing boredom. And when we're in that rut, we may start thinking of, okay, so how can I spice this up? Maybe it's a rut of marriage. Maybe it's the rut of work. Whatever it is, if we start getting bored with what we're doing, then we have a tendency to look to escape that boredom. Having this routine, when I was thinking about this, the thing that kind of kept coming to mind, and some of you guys might remember this, but back in the, 80s, there was a Dunkin' Donuts commercial where there's a guy, his alarm clock goes off and he opens his eyes and he's laying there and he goes, "It's time to make the donuts. It's time to make the donuts." And he kind of wobbles through his house, and you see him kind of go into the bathroom in his pajamas, and he comes out and he's wearing his Dunkin' Donuts outfit, right? And he's like, "It's time to make the donuts." And he does this all the way, and then it cuts to the scene where he's actually at Dunkin' Donuts and they're making the donuts. And it's like he snaps out of it because somebody does something wrong in making the donuts. And of course he has power, he has the flour on his hand, he kind of smacks him on the face. He's like, "No, that's not how we make the donuts," or whatever. But he's in this rut. He's like, he's in this normal routine that he can literally sleepwalk through. He can sleepwalk through his routine. If we're not careful, that can happen to us. We can get into this routine where we're sleepwalking, and if we become aware of it, we become conscious of it, we'll realize, okay, well, I'm starting to get bored, and I need to do something to engage my mind. I need to do something that makes this feel a little more exciting. I need to escape this bored feeling. And if we're not careful, that will take us down a very self-destructive path. Now, as we dig in today, and as you guys have already probably kind of read ahead, and you see the passage that we're digging into today, we're going to dig into a story that's really familiar to a lot of us. And if you grew up in church, there's no doubt in my mind that you have heard this story. And this, what we're looking at today, this is going to be Jesus speaking. Jesus is going to be telling this story. He used He used stories very frequently. We come to know them today as parables. But he would speak to folks using story, using parable, because he wanted to make sure that whatever he was trying to communicate, the masses would have an easier time of understanding. So if he told a story, there's more of a chance for them to actually recognize what he's talking about, gain the understanding of what he's talking about, and then have the application to live out. So today is no different. Today, as he is talking, he starts out with this story, and hopefully as we go through this, we will actually catch his point, and we will see some things that we can take and apply to our lives as we understand them. So picking up Luke 15, and verse 11, we're going to read through it all, and then we'll come back and break some things down. He, being Jesus, also said, a man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the estate I have coming to me. So he distributed the assets to them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered together all he had and traveled to a distant country, where he squandered his estate in foolish living. After he had spent everything, a severe famine struck that country, and he had nothing. Then he went to work for one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. He longed to eat his fill from the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one would give him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food? And here I am, dying of hunger. I'll get up, I'll go to my father, and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired workers. So he got up, went to his father, but while the son was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran, threw his arms around his neck, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father told his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Then bring the fattened calf and slaughter it, and let's celebrate with a feast. Because this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. As he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. He summoned one of the servants, questioning what these things meant. Your brother is here, he told him, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. Then he became angry and didn't want to go in. So his father came out and pleaded with him. But he replied to his father, look, I have been slaving many years for you, and I have never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me a goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has devoured your assets with prostitutes, you slaughtered the fattened calf for him. Son, he said, you're always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we have to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Now again, if you've been around church at all, you've most likely heard this story, right? And a lot of times we can focus on, well, here's the attitude of the older brother. He was kind of a jerk about it, right? Or we focus on the receptiveness and the compassion of the father. But today, as we kind of dig into this and we have this thought of escape, I want us to kind of focus more on the younger brother and talk about the circumstances from which he wanted to escape. We're going to kind of approach it a little differently than normal. Instead of kind of going back through in the order of the verses here, we're going to start closer to the end. So we're already, after the prodigal son has returned, the father has decided to throw a party and celebrate. We're going to pick up with the son. We're going to pick up in verse 29. The older son says, look, I have been slaving many years for you, and I have never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me a goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. You see, if we kind of look at this and we pause for a second, we can pick up on a few things. We get a little bit of a sense of what this life was like, what this young man was going through, what the older son and the younger son were probably experiencing. When we go back and we look at this, one of the first things that we notice is that the younger son was expected to work. He was expected to work. Yes, they had servants, obviously, because the older son summoned a servant and asked what was going on. Why was there all this music playing? Why was there dancing going on? What was this celebration about? He asked the servant, and the servant gave him the information. But even so, he was out in the field working. He still had responsibilities. He still had a job to do to help care for the home, to help care for the family. He still had responsibilities. He was expected to work. Another thing we notice here in just this little blurb from the older son is that he was expected to follow the rules and obey orders. There were rules in place. Apparently the father ran a tight ship. He gave the sons rules by which they needed to live. Things that they needed to follow to accomplish the work that was set before them. And I'm sure, like many of us as parents, if a kid steps out of line, there would be consequences, right? So there were rules that they had to follow, there were orders that they had to obey. And so as we're looking at this younger son, and we're seeing him taking a step out of things, we're like, what is he really trying to escape? He's probably got it pretty good. Why is he running away? Here are some things. Another thing we can pick up is, it sounds like he had a routine. If he had work that he had to do and there were rules and orders to follow, then it's very likely that he had a routine. And that routine, very likely to him, and we don't have clarity on the age, but it's very likely that his routine was becoming very boring. He was tired of getting up and having to go milk the cows and to hoe the garden and whatever else was on his plate. He had this regular routine. Again, get up, go make the donuts. I can do this in my sleep. It's a routine. It becomes a rut. Another thing that we can gather from the older son is that he felt trapped. He said he'd been slaving for many years for the father. He was working all the time. It's like being stuck in a dead-end job. And then he makes the comment, I work and I do all these things and I obey the rules and I do what you ask me to do, and you have not once even given me a goat. A goat. Here you're killing the fattened calf, which is a more expensive animal. There's greater care given to that animal than there is a goat. You haven't even given me a goat to celebrate with my friends. I have been faithful. I have worked hard. I have done all the things that you've asked. I've stayed in line with what you're asking me to do. You don't appreciate me. You don't appreciate what I do. You don't appreciate the fact that I show up and I do all these things. You haven't even given me a goat to celebrate with my friends. I haven't had a chance to enjoy the success, the fruits of my labor with my friends. The older son felt trapped, and surely the younger son, if the older one was feeling trapped, surely the younger one was feeling trapped. He was showing up, he had his routine. He didn't see a future that had a promise of anything better than what he was doing. He felt trapped. When we recognize these conditions, it begins to make a little more sense as to why the son wanted to escape. He wanted to escape. And you start thinking about these things, and if you feel trapped, you feel like you're stuck in a dead-end job, what do you want to do? You want to escape that job, right? You feel like you're working and you're not appreciated, you want to escape that. You feel like what you're being asked to do is just out of the question, you want to escape that. So now we see some of these potential circumstances that these boys are living in, and of course, we don't see anything where their lives are in danger. We don't see anything that, we can recognize as over the top, inappropriate. But yet, here's this younger son. He's wanting to get away. He wants to escape. Let's go back and pick up at verse 11. And he, being Jesus, also said, a man who had 2 sons, the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the estate I have coming to me. So he distributed the assets to them. Now it's worth noting here that in Jesus' day, the firstborn son was set to inherit anything that the family had. They got the bulk of whatever the family had. Now, if the family had enough provisions, they had enough of assets and estate and whatever else, then they could make provisions for multiple children. But the oldest always got the lion's share, right? They always got the most. They always got the best livestock. They always got the premier piece of land. They always got the best stuff. And it's also pretty obvious here that this son, even though he was the second son, knew that his family was in a situation where they were making a provision for him. Right? It wasn't just his older brother who was going to get something when his parents came to their end. Right? The younger son came to him and said, Father, I would like to get everything that's coming to me for my inheritance. I want to go ahead and get that. He asked for his inheritance. He knew that the family was making a plan for him. So we can figure out that their family was pretty well off. The younger son knew that he had an inheritance coming. He knew that he had an inheritance coming. See, the family wasn't just scraping by. The son knew that there was a game plan for him. Something that his parents were thinking of to help set him up for future success. If the family lived in poverty, then the youngest son wouldn't have too much of an inheritance to inquire about, right? You definitely wouldn't have enough to go and say, Father, I want everything that's coming to me. His father would like, oh, here's a wooden nickel. Have fun with that. He's expecting something. He understands that there is an inheritance. He asked and received his share of the estates. If the family didn't have means to part with the assets and still survive, then he would not have gotten what he asked for. Again, the intentions of the younger son. What is he looking to do? Why is he asking for these resources? And as we continue to dig into this, we understand that he wanted to be equipped to escape. The younger son wanted to be equipped to escape. We can recall our teenage years. Some of us, it's easier than others. This guy. But we can recall our teenage years. We see the activity of teens, and we can recognize our own behavior as a young person, right? We remember those Friday and Saturday nights before we were working and wanting to go out and enjoy time with friends for Friday nights during football season. I was going to football games and trying to make a mess that the school custodians had to clean up. But that's beside the point. Going out and going on a date, having a movie come out that I wanted to go see. And as a teen, without a job, what do? Hey, Pop, can I get some money? I want to go out. Can I get some cash for dinner? Can I get some cash for the movie ticket? I got a girl going with me. Can I get enough cash for 2 movie tickets? And then that turns into a different conversation, but that's beside the point from today. And it doesn't just stop there, right? I mean, I wasn't privileged enough to have a car as a teenager. I had to buy my own car. Well, that's not true. I did inherit a huge van and then a station wagon, and it was just... Well, I drive a van today.
Keep on moving.
First love, baby. But it doesn't just stop with the cash. It's not just the ask. the money, right? What else did I need? I want to go to a movie. How do I get there? I am not riding a horse.
Transportation.
You know? Hey, Pop, can I get the keys to the car? Come back inside the house. Can I get some gas money? Because you come home from work with an empty tank. What's up? You know I'm going out tonight. We're asking for resources to escape, to go indulge in something that we will determine or we will deem as not boring. The younger son asked for the resources needed to escape. And the father gave him what he asked for. Going back to the passage. Verse 13, not many days later, the younger son gathered together all he had and traveled to a distant country, where he squandered his estate in foolish living. After he had spent everything, a severe famine struck that country, and he had nothing. Now again, there's a couple of things for us to process here. He thought that by escaping to a new land, this would banish his boredom. New scenery can be good, but we got to be smart about it. We got to recognize that changing our location doesn't change our character. Changing our location doesn't change who we are. Sometimes we can try to run from our problems, and they just seem to follow us, right? It might be that we are our problem. It's not somebody else's fault. It's not some other situation. It's actually us. It's our boredom. It's our discontentment. It's our sin that's creating the problem. And just because we go to a new place does not mean that we escape our boredom. It doesn't mean that we escape our temptations. Now maybe when he got there, maybe it changed for him for a little while, but soon he was discontented and bored again. He's in a new country and he is bored again. And this led him to a spending spree. Nouveau riche, baby. Got all this money. I'm going to live it up. He thought he could escape by buying his way out of boredom. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I can relate to this. I get this. I remember when I first started working, I got those first few paychecks. Now, I got an allowance as a kid. I got an allowance. I did chores around the house, and my parents gave me an allowance. And they taught me to tithe, and they told me to save my money, and I did until we got to the store, and then I bought something stupid. And I never had any money because I just couldn't hold on to it, because I wanted that pop gun, because I wanted that chewing gum, and I wanted that cassette tape. That's right, cassette tapes. Can I get a witness? But I got that paycheck. Man, the first job that I had, working a full day. Now, it was minimum wage plus like 15 cents, but I was rich in comparison to what I'd had previously. The week prior to that first paycheck, I was destitute. I was dirt. I had nothing. I had nothing because I just bought a pack of chewing gum and 2 cassette tapes. So, it was over. But that first paycheck, man, I was so smart. I took it to the bank. I kept 10% out to give to church on Sunday, and I put the rest of it in a savings account, and I walked out going, man, that feels so good. No, I didn't do that. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Heck no. I left. Of course, I pulled out 10% because I knew my dad would skin me alive. He found out that I had a paycheck and I didn't tithe on it. So, there's that. It wasn't because I was worshiping God. It's because I feared the wrath of my father. But I pulled out my tithe, and then guess what? We lived out in the country. Like, my closest neighbor that was not related to me was like a mile and a half away. Okay? Now, I had some neighbors who were close to me, but it was my uncle, and I don't want to go play with him. It was weird. But for me, to get out of town, I mean that I drove 30 to 45 minutes. I went into the city. It's a new country. And I hit the go-kart track.
Come on.
Go-kart racing. I mean, let me tell you, me and my buddies, come Friday night, if it was not football season, we were at the go-kart track / pool hall. Okay? We would get there shortly after hitting McDonald's, and we hit McDonald's that night. And I got like the supersized fries and everything, like I was rolling in cash. So I got the biggie size, I got the big meal. We hit the go-kart track. I don't even know how many times we raced. I mean, it was just like we got off, we went back and got in line. I mean, it was just continuous. Hours we spent doing this. And when we were done, when we all wrecked each other in the go-karts and been essentially escorted off the track, we went into the pool hall area. And of course, I volunteered to pay for the table for as long as we were going to be there. I escaped into a new city because it was a new city. I escaped into some new activity, blew all my money. I escaped my responsibility. I escaped my boredom. I left the house and I went and did foolish things. Now, I didn't go as far off the deep end as this young guy did. But when I got home that night, I mean, I barely had enough money to make it home with gas because I told you, hey, you didn't fill up the tank. Well, that was pretty common in my house. My dad would drive the car to work, and then I would get the keys on Friday, and he's like, fill it up. If you want to drive it, you can fill it up.
There you go.
And I'm like, well, and he's like, you're working now. Yes, sir. It wasn't that bad, but it wasn't that bad. But here I am. I got this opportunity to escape my life, to escape this boredom of sitting around the house on Friday night, Saturday night. And what I do, I had this opportunity, and I took it. Here's this young man. He felt that he could escape to a foreign land, and that only gave him something fresh for a short period of time, and then he went on a spending spree. If I can indulge in the things that maybe my father wouldn't allow me to do, maybe I can get away from this feeling of the youngest child. I can escape my childhood. I can become a man. And he escaped into this new land, and he indulged in foolish living, and he squandered all that he had. Squandered all that he had. Picking back up at verse 15. And when he went off to work, he went to work for one of the citizens in that country who sent him into the fields to feed his pigs. He longed to eat his fill from the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one would give him anything. Now remember, this is Jesus telling the story. He's talking to the Jews at this point. All right, so when he starts talking about a guy who is working with pigs, he's a swine herder at this point. You remember last series we were talking about shepherds? They were responsible for taking care of the sheep. Well, the sheep were dumb, but they weren't necessarily nasty. And pigs are very gross. They're sweet, but they're gross. And as a Jew, they still had the food laws. They still had things that they weren't supposed to consume. And so pigs were part of their whole thing. And so for Jesus to be telling this story of a guy whose family was well off enough to give him an inheritance as the second-born child, as the youngest child, to now be from that household put into a position of caring for pigs, and for him to be in a position where he goes, if I could only eat what the pigs are eating, then maybe I wouldn't be starving to death right now. I'm sure that as Jesus is telling this, there was an audible gasp from the crowd. This is unbelievable. Everybody in the audience in Jesus' time would have recognized that this younger son came from a stable, financially secure family. They would have recognized his self-destructive behavior. They would have understood the severity of the results of this young man's actions. In his efforts to escape boredom, this young man hit rock bottom. He was forced to take the worst possible job of his day. Not only did he now have the worst job, but he was hungry. He was so hungry that he wanted to eat the food that the pigs were eating. He was in a desperate situation. Desperate times call for desperate measures. You see, what this guy escaped to was desperate times. When he escaped, he fled to failure. He fled to failure. So he's in a foreign land. He's working for some people who don't care if he eats or not. He's failed on his own. He's feeling ashamed. He's embarrassed. And now that he's hit rock bottom, he's not bored anymore. He's not bored. He's fully engaged. He's thinking. He starts thinking about his previous life. This life that he was bored with before. This life that he wanted to escape. And he now realizes that his situation was not all that bad before he escaped. In fact, he realizes while he's sitting there, longing for some pods that the pigs were eating, he realizes that someone in his father's corps of servants had the same job he had, but he was being taken care of. He was being fed at a table. He was being cared for. Somebody actually cared, whether or not he had food to eat. And at this point, the young man decides that he needs to escape disaster and go back home. Go back to the Father and confess his sins, to beg for forgiveness and hope that the Father will at least give him a job working with the other hired hands. And as we know, the son returns home and his father welcomes him with open arms. The father throws a big party. He's so excited that the son has come home. The one who was dead is now alive. And let's celebrate. This was the response. And of course, as Jesus shares the story, he's illustrating God's relationship with his human creation. He's given us the resources to escape. And as much as he loves and cares for us, he allows us. He allows us to have the resources to make our own decisions. He allows us to make mistakes. When we escape and we flee to failure, when we hit rock bottom, he's ready to receive us home, to accept our apology and to celebrate our conversion from death to life. For us today, when it comes to boredom, we have unlimited resources at our fingertips. There are people who are living on the streets, but they have cell phones. It's crazy to me. How do you have a cell phone and you are asking for a handout just so that you can eat today? It just blows my mind. We were in Haiti, and we experienced the same thing. There were people who were literally, there was a family where we were serving. There was a family. We saw them walking every day. They would come and go. And they were living, there were, I don't even know, some cement blocks stacked up, and there was a piece of tin leaned up against it. That was their home. That was their home. And they're walking and they're on their cell phones. What are you doing? We have unlimited resources for escape. Unlimited resources. And I just hope that as we start to drift into this moment of boredom and we start thinking about an escape, that as we look at resources, we start looking for a roadmap. That we look for guidance. That we look for something that is not going to lead to our demise. There are many lessons that we can learn from this passage today. There's a lot of things that we can go back and pull from, all the different perspectives in the story. But for us today, I really hope that our bottom line is to understand, to escape boredom, we must go to the Father for resources and a plan for success. We must go to the Father for the resources and a plan for success. See, left to his own, the young man had the resources, but he didn't have a good game plan. He had the resources to escape. But as he fled right into failure. We can do that today too. Don't let boredom lead you into temptation that will lead you to failure. When you feel that boredom coming on, you're looking for something to engage your mind. When you go to the Father asking for resources, Lord, give me something to do with my time today, and let it be productive for you. Give me a roadmap for success. Give me guidance for success. Let's pray.